We are absolutely delighted to be joined today by Stephen Anderson. Stephen is a director, writer, and storyboard artist with over 30 years of experience in the animation industry. At Walt Disney Animation Studios, he was a story artist on Tarzan and a story supervisor for The Emperor's New Groove and Brother Bear. He then directed the feature films Meet the Robinson, which just turned 18 a couple of days ago, and Winnie the Pooh. Stephen has also been an instructor at the California Institute of the Arts. He is also the author of the new book, Disney in Between, The Lost Years, 1966-1986, published by the Old Mill Press, that we'll be discussing in a good bit of detail today. Stephen, so exciting to have you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Hey, great to be here, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
No, it's wonderful. So want to start with a little bit about you and your background. Clearly, you are passionate about Disney films. You are passionate about Disney history. What is your animation origin story?
Well, from as early as I can remember, I had a steady diet of Disney, basically Disney anything,
Mm.
Disney books, Disney movies, Disney Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday nights. My parents very much raised me as a Disney kid, so um, I just responded so strongly to just the Disney thing, the aesthetic of Disney animation in particular, but I loved all the live action movies. I loved, again, Wonderful World of Disney every Sunday night. I was constantly like, we would go to church on Sunday evenings, and church always ended at 7 p.m. And Wonderful World of Disney started at 7 p.m. And of course, my parents, as soon as services were over, they wanted to chat with all of their friends. And I was always tugging on their, you know, their sleeves and pant legs, going, "Can we go home? Because I want to see Wonderful World of Disney."
It's
Uh,
pre-VCR, right? Probably
oh
pre-VCR.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
pre-VCR,
yeah.
way pre-VCR. And like I said, books as well, coloring books, sticker books, tons of Disney records. Well, tons for me, I guess, maybe not tons to today when you look at some people's collections, but
Sure.
um, I had quite a few Disney records that I played all the time. Loved Disney music, just all of it. I just absorbed it. Disney just sort of became my comfort zone.
And, how do you parlay that into a career? Because I kind of look, I mean, you've had unbelievable success with directing films and everything. So if I've kind of always equated it, tell me if I'm wrong, a bit like kids want to be a professional athlete. Like I want to be a professional athlete, but such a small percentage of them are actually able to do it. And you've been
Mhm.
able to, direct a Disney movie. How'd you do it?
Well, so back to my
Yeah.
my Disney obsession. Um, in particular with the animated movies, I remember uh, anytime I would go see one of those, they made me want to draw. I wanted to come home, and for some reason, it just inspired me to try to capture those expressions, the just the appeal of Disney animated characters, the poses, the acting, just all of that stuff. I just loved it, and I wanted to see if I could capture that as well. Something about that really struck me, and that led to a real love of drawing, um, and loved all animation as well, not just Disney, but all kinds of
Sure.
animation, and knew that I wanted somehow to work at Disney, but I didn't really know what that was. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was still pretty young, so I didn't quite have a grasp of what anything was. And then in 1981, two of Disney's nine old men, Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, released this incredible book called Disney Animation: The Illusion of Life.
Yeah.
And I mean, my jaw hit the floor when I saw that because I'd never seen a book that laid out, the process of Disney animation that thoroughly and specifically. And so that made me realize, oh, there's these people called animators, and they are the people that bring those characters to life. All the things that inspire me and the things that I'm trying to capture in my cartoons and my drawings, those are the people that do that. So that really made me say, okay, I want to be an animator at Disney. So I followed that path. That took me to the California Institute of the Arts out here in Valencia, California, to study animation and to hopefully be an animator someday, which ironically, very soon after I left Cal Arts and in my first job as an animator, I realized very quickly, I don't know if I really am cut out to be an animator. I'm not sure this is really my thing. Uh, and luckily, I was able to move into storyboarding and directing, which were also things I was very passionate about. But being an animator was sort of my number one. I picked up a couple other ambitions along the way, but I was still focused on animation, animating, I should say. Um, so then that moved me into more story stuff, storyboarding, writing, directing, that kind of thing, which is really my true love. So thankfully, I found that.
Yeah, and so, you said animating wasn't necessarily you think what was it? What caused a pivot?
There's such a very specific kind of drawing that you have to do as an animator. Certainly, there's all of the fun, creative stuff of the acting and the performance, but there's also a whole technical side. And
Mm.
we're talking about 2D animation, obviously,
Sure,
where
sure.
you don't have the luxury of already having a built, basically a computer puppet that you're moving in space that you're animating with. So you're doing everything on paper. And so things like animating in perspective, a character, walking into three-quarter perspective towards the camera or away from camera, um, that just broke my brain. I had struggled so much with that kind of thing. Another thing, um, you have to, as an animator, you had to keep your volumes consistent. So for example, the head, a character's head has a certain volume as given to you by the model sheet, the proportions of the characters, all those kind of things, and you have to follow those models. And my problem things I had things like the volumes were always growing and shrinking from within the course of the scene because I wasn't drawing the head the exact same proportion every drawing. Therefore, like I'm much more of an instinctive kind of very non-technical kind of artist. And so I learned that very quickly that I didn't quite have the makings of an animator, but that was okay because what I loved about storyboarding is I could still draw all the poses and the expressions with the characters, and then I was done. I didn't have to make a move. I didn't have to in between them. If there was a little bit of inconsistency from panel to panel in my storyboards, that was okay
Yeah.
because that's just okay with storyboarding. So uh, again, I'm really happy that I was able to test the waters of being an animator and realize, not quite for me, but I found my real passion.
And it worked out just fine.
Yeah.
So you graduated from Cal Arts. Did you go right into Disney, or did you have to did you work and apprenticeship until you got there?
I worked for about 4 years at a studio called Hyperion
Oh, yeah.
Animation.
Sure, sure.
Uh, so that was my first job in the industry. I was an animating assistant on these are some, I don't know if you're familiar with these movies, some real classics of the 90s. Animating assistant on Rover Dangerfield.
I actually remember. I
Um,
remember that one. I do
I
remember. I
was,
swear to God, I do.
I was an animator on a movie called Bebe's Kids. And then I there was a couple shorts that the studio was doing and I animated on them. And then I moved into some TV storyboarding and then at the same studio. And
Sure.
then that led to my first directing job at that same studio as well. So I did 2 seasons of a really weird, not so great animated TV show called The Itsy Bitsy Spider. But I learned a ton.
Sure.
And one of the cool things about a smaller studio is that oftentimes you do get to wear a lot of different hats from project to project. So in the 4 years I was at Hyperion, I animated, I storyboarded, I got to do some visual development kind of concept work for a couple of the projects in development. Then I got to direct. I mean, I got to do all these things in the span of 4 years. No, at a bigger studio, I would never have been able to bounce around and kind of get a real overview of all those
Sure.
different disciplines. So that was great. And then after those 4 years is when I moved to Disney in 1995. So I left CalArts in 91. Yeah, and then worked through at Hyperion for about 4 years, and then went to Disney in 95.
That's amazing. Was it? You did storyboarding at Disney, you direct Disney. What was your ultimate goal? Was your ultimate goal, I want to direct a Disney movie? Was that something you even thought possible? Was that your brass ring?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
As I said, I was super excited about being an animator, but as I got older, um, I started really getting fascinated with screenwriting. Also, just sort of learning kind of the way I learned that, oh, there's these people called animators. I started learning, oh, there's people called directors, and they're the ones that are the leader of the team, and they lead the charge, and they galvanize everyone together and say, we're going to make this thing, and they inspire the team to work together and create something. And I always really liked doing leadership roles as a kid. I was in Boy Scouts,
Mm.
school projects, things like that. I often got put in leadership roles in those areas and found that I really liked it. I'm not an extrovert. I'm not an alpha, but somehow I found a way to kind of channel a different side of me that made me feel comfortable being out in front, leading a team. So this notion of being a director, I thought, oh, that's really cool because it's still creating things, but it's getting to oversee the bigger picture, and you get to work with not just one department that you're a member of, but you get to work with all of the departments. You get to everybody on a film, what be it live action, animation, whatever it is. um it's like that quote, the what is it, the orchestra plays the music and the conductor plays the orchestra.
Yeah, 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 for
you
sure.
know
It's a great
and
analogy. It's true. Yeah.
yeah, there was something really exciting about that, like, oh wow, if I was an animator or story artist, which I still love doing, I still love being in the trenches, but you're basically one color on the paint box. But the director gets to play with all the paints, gets to paint with all of those colors. So that was really inspiring to me. And so, yeah, I um, wasn't rushing to be a director, but I certainly was like, okay, I'm always going to be looking to see if that opportunity is going to exist and plant seeds where I need to plant them, in order to perhaps one day get to do that. And so I feel extremely fortunate that I was able to get to do that stuff at Disney.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Meet the Robinsons and Winnie the Pooh and everything. But one thing, you said you're not an extrovert, but I do have to, before we get there, you not only directed, you voice acted in it also.
All
So,
right.
so how was it, as someone that you might be more introverted, you're out there emoting, making people like myself and my family laugh out loud.
Yeah.
How'd you kind of tap into that?
Well, it goes back to my Disney records that I talked about,
Yeah,
because there's the Disney music that I loved as I sat in my room as a kid, at my desk drawing my cartoons, Disney music. But then I also had a lot of those Disney storyteller records that had clips from the movies and audio clips from a lot of the dialogue. And so I would just imitate them. And so I started getting I love just animation voices,
sure.
and um, kind of just playing around with voices myself. And then when you get to Disney, or at a place like Disney, we workshop our films in the storyboard versions, and we put temp music and temp sound effects and temp dialogue on those workshop reels, and we do all the dialogue ourselves. So because I like to do voices, I ended up doing what we call scratch dialogue.
Yeah.
Or quite a few movies, I did scratch on Tarzan and Emperor's New Groove, and then I did scratch on Robinsons, and that's what ended up my scratch ended up staying in the movie, and then I became the voiceover role. But the nice thing about animation voices is you're just in a little box,
Yeah.
with a few people, a few people looking at you in the glass through the glass, but they're all people you really know and love and are super comfortable with. So it was easy to do. Uh, you know, Different than like being on a live action set and having to act in front of cameras and other crew members and other actors and that kind of thing. So it's sort of a little safer space for
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
And just for those who are wondering, Stephen was the voice of the bowler hat guy, the adult goob, as well as Grandpa Bud, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that just awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to talk about that a lot more, but I want to talk about the book. So it's fascinating, right? Uh it's based on a part of history. Like you have the Golden Age, you have the Silver Age, you have the Renaissance, all these, flashy parts everyone's talking about. You talk about a part that not a lot of people talk about, but has a lot of historical significance. Why did you write the book?
For that very reason,
Yeah, yeah.
because it's very it tends to be leapfrogged over in the history books for the exactly what you said. It's the non-sexy time in Disney history. Um, uh, they just lost Walt Disney, and the studio was sort of set into a tailspin, trying to figure out how do we how do we a just continue forward without our guiding light, without Walt, but then also how do we what is a Disney movie anymore
Mhm.
as the world and as Hollywood is changing around them. Hollywood went through big changes, of course, in the 70s with the kind of the movie brats and those movies like The Godfather and Easy Rider, and um, what a Hollywood movie was started changing, and it became much more, um, much grittier, a
Mhm.
little
Mhm.
darker, a little more reflective of reality, which is not what Disney is. So there was trying to figure out, okay, how do we coexist with those movies? But then as the 70s gave way to the 80s, now we're going back to the big spectacle kind of movies, but we're doing them on a grander scale, bigger budgets, state-of-the-art special effects with movies, from Spielberg and Lucas and all those guys. And the blockbuster returned, but yet Disney was still sort of left in the dust because they also weren't doing movies at that level.
Mhm.
So what did Disney mean anymore? Their audience is sort of eroded, and there was a lack of relevance to Disney. So how do we, what is Disney anymore? And so I just found that fascinating. It's just a studio that's based on, that was its founder, one of his core values was innovation,
Mhm.
as well as forward thinking. And after they lost him, they kind of lost sight of those things because they ended up, instead of innovating and moving forward, they kind of calcified and held on to the past, and were very reluctant to move forward. So I think it's a really interesting story from a Disney perspective. I also find a lot of relevance just to life in general, in because it's a very fundamental thing in our human experience to go through a disruption that leads to great change, upheaval sometimes, and then we have to figure out how do we move forward? How do we hold on to the values of the past, but how do we move ahead and make choices that bring on that are progressive, that move us forward. And there's that gray period between the disruption and the choice to move forward. That is why I call the movie a Disney in between, because it is those in between times in life, and in this case, in Disney history, um, that I think oftentimes are our greatest struggles. Those periods of grayness, those periods of indecision, of confusion. So I found it very relevant just to life in general. Yeah,
It was almost existential, right? Because it's true, like you said,
yeah,
you lose the luminary. Whenever you lose a Steve Jobs or anything like that, there's always that pause. And
yeah.
I think one thing you made very clear, and I thought was super interesting, is it's transition. It was a whole bunch of transition. What do you learn? The tension, how do you grow? And so, looking through that, first of all, I love the analogies you draw, but you drew, no pun intended, between in betweening as an animation art and in betweening in terms of transition. But a lot of these had really historical effects on Disney and what it became. So talk about some of those transitions that you think had the biggest impact moving the company forward.
Yeah, that's the other fascinating thing is that oftentimes, and this also relates to life in general, those darker periods sometimes are when the seeds for progress are incubating,
Hmm.
and we just don't know it yet. but it's oftentimes those are the times of reflection, of learning something new, so that then we can create whatever the next step is. And that was totally happening with Disney. I mean, the people that created, talk about the animation
Yeah.
renaissance once, by what was it, 89, when Little Mermaid came out. And
Mhm.
I guess Roger Rabbit, kind of the year before that, was sort of the first starting pistol. But then Mermaid and Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and Lion King, on and on. All of those people came to Disney during this time period. Most of them came in the mid 70s. Um, and excuse me, uh, and learned the craft from the old guys, the old guard, the remaining nine old men. And sorry,
No, it's all right. Need water? Okay, water.
um, uh, and learned their craft from that old guard, the nine old men that were left, and any of those older generations that were willing to pass on the those batons. Um, and if you didn't have that, if you didn't, and sorry, the
No, please.
reason they did that, the reason why they were even there, those young people, the reason why they came in the mid 70s is because for the first time in 70 or 71, 70, 71, Disney Studios said, we're going to start losing our animation, losing the craft of animation
Mhm.
if we don't do something, because they hadn't let in young people, I think, probably since the late 50s, mid to late 50s or so. Um, Young people like Floyd Norman, Don Bluth, they came into
Mhm.
Disney, worked on
Yeah.
Sleeping Beauty. That was, as far as I'm aware, that was the last kind of influx of young folks coming in. So it had been at least 10 years, if not more. Um, and the old guard were starting to die out. I mean, literally,
Mhm.
or many were just retiring. And the company very smartly said, we got to bring in some new talent. And so they started a training program for the first time in the early 70s. So part of that in between time was, we might lose the craft of Disney animation. And it led to a great choice of, let's bring in new talent and let's keep the art of Disney animation alive. And they did that. And in doing that, they did exactly what they set out to do, because cut to, you know, 10, 15 years later,
Yeah.
you've got Ron Clements and John Musker with, doing Little Mermaid and Aladdin. You've got Kirk and Gary doing Beauty and the Beast. You've got all of the players on all of those films. Don Hahn, producer of Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin. All of those people, they all started from the mid 70s until like maybe the mid 80s. Um, Computer animation. Um, it would take quite a while for that to kind of take hold, but you know, Disney made Tron,
Yeah.
and that they weren't the first people to do computer animation, but they were the first people to put it in a full length movie. And then there were some other side projects that were kind of percolating that didn't end up going anywhere, but whet the appetite of John Lasseter, who was there, who came in, I think, in 76, 77 somewhere. Um, Now, John tried to do computer animation at Disney. It didn't quite take hold, and he was let go for various reasons.
Yeah.
But again, cut to what, I don't know, 10 years or so later, Pixar Animation gets
Of
started.
course.
They
Yeah.
start doing all these brilliant shorts that are winning Oscars and all this, and they're elevating and advancing the craft of computer animation. And then in 95, you have Toy Story, changed the world,
Yeah.
changed the industry as we know it. But those seeds were planted in this in-between time. So those are a couple examples of of the enormous amount of change that happened. If you didn't have it, so if you didn't have this dark time, that's the
Yeah.
thing. That's what's so
Yeah.
fascinating about, and just in life in general. Like, we hate those times of indecision. We hate those times of being in between, of not of the old ways dying out and the new ways not being born yet. and we're stuck in that middle time period. We hate those time periods, but those are we have to have those in order to have the next phase of we have to have that dark in order to have the next phase of light. Just part of our experience. Sorry, I'm going on and on about it.
No, no, no.
It's
I mean, this is
fascinating.
this is the crux of the book, and it's
Yeah.
fascinating because I think you wrap it up, and I don't want to give anything away, but you wrap it up so beautifully with a bunch of if this didn't happen, this wouldn't happen. If this didn't happen, this wouldn't
Mhm.
have happened. One of them was the hiring of the animators and everything else. But but again, getting into a little bit of the details of the story, there was also a lot of tension, right? It wasn't just a matter of, hey, we're hiring these people and they did great. There was a lot of old guard versus new guard and story fighting and animation versus live action. Talk a little about some of
Yeah.
those challenges that the company faced.
Yeah, in particular in animation, I think there was the probably I think the animation side of things, while there was still in live action, animation was much more heated. Feels like to me there was more at stake because animation was so synonymous with Disney, and it was always kind of been considered the heart and soul of Disney. And there was this really fascinating, and this was something I didn't really anticipate. I knew there was tensions between generations and things, but as I started talking to more people that were there in the animation side of things, and you start realizing this was like they really were battling for the identity and soul of Disney animation. I mean, people were so drastically on different camps as to what is Disney animation and how should it move forward. You know, you had a lot of these younger folks that were coming in and they wanted to change things up and they wanted to borrow from Looney Tunes and they wanted to borrow from
Mhm.
Tex Avery and like Disney animation doesn't have to be one thing, it can be all things. And to their point, when you look back at some of the classic Disney stuff, there isn't one thing. They do a lot of different styles and a lot of different techniques in the Walt era. But then there were people, some of the older guard, or even kind of a mid-age range of people like Don Bluth, who felt very adamant that no, Disney has to be it has to have a certain look to it. It has to
Mhm.
have a certain drawing style. You can't do anything too cartoony. You can't do anything that breaks the anatomy of your character. Like everything has to be very round and solid and three-dimensional. It is very classic kind of drawing and presentation. And boy, some serious butting of heads just between that. And it's so funny to me. It's not funny, but there's such an interesting, well, it is funny because you just think, wow, why are you fighting about this? I mean, why can't both of those camps exist? I mean,
Yeah.
again, this is Disney. Who's putting limits on you? You could do anything, you can do all of it. But because Walt had just passed, and because there was this fear of, well, we have to do the right thing and make it right for Walt
Yeah.
and uphold that legacy, there was this fear that there was one way of doing it that was the correct way, and people fought over, well, mine's the right way, no, mine's the right way, no, mine is the right way. I think if it were any other time, like today,
Yeah.
you'd never get those kind of arguments. People are going to debate and they're going to have differences of opinions, but there's never this, decree of Disney animation is only this or only that. But it was just because that time was so charged in the wake of losing Walt that, you know,
It's like you said, you lose the company whose man is named after the company is named after this person.
yeah,
He's gone. It's probably a lot of nervousness too. It's like,
oh,
what does Walt want? I don't know. What do you think?
yeah,
It's a lot of nervousness, a lot of anxiety, and just wanting to do the right thing. I'm guessing it was all positive intent, but just not knowing because your guiding light's not there.
100%.
Yeah, yeah,
It's very easy to criticize a lot of the studio leadership who took up the reins
yeah.
without Walt. Because yes, there was a lot of very timid decisions. There were a lot of very what you might see as backwards kind of decisions. Uh, but I have a great amount of empathy for those people because if I were in their shoes, I would be freaking out too. And I don't know what I would do. I don't know if I'd want to go, hey, everybody, we're going to level the playing field and we're going to not do anything that Walt used to do. And we're going to do something totally like who would, like, that's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And I have, while I can acknowledge that, sure, maybe some better choices could have been made. I also have, again, great empathy for the situation they were in because that's a tough spot to be in. And I don't know if I would have done any better.
Yeah. And look, there were successes, there were bright spots, but
Yeah,
I know one thing you mentioned that, and you tell me what you think, but I get a feeling the theme is like the Black Cauldron was that bottom? Was that kind of rock bottom, do
I
you
think
think?
so. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it seems to be the case. So, talk about what happened there and maybe how you rise from the ashes after something that they're super excited about doesn't take flight.
Yeah. The irony is that for many years, because I guess Disney bought the rights to those books in the early 70s, I believe.
Uh,
Um, so that movie it came out in 85. So at least 15 years, that movie was gestating in various forms. And it was always looked at as being, this is going to be the movie. This is going to be um, Disney's huge comeback, like on the level of a Snow White or a
yeah.
Pinocchio. This is going to be like, and then a few years later, when Star Wars came out, it was, this is going to be our answer to Star Wars. We're going to compete with Star Wars. We're going to make the Star Wars of animation. Um, so there was so much pressure put on this movie that may have had something
Mhm.
to do with it because you have to live up to the expectations, just internal expectations that everybody had on this movie. But then it was a serious clash of culture and generations, like we're talking about. I mean, this felt like it was. There were a couple of pretty dark times before that, but this one, because the directors and the producer were the old guard, um, and the young folks that were working on the movie really wanted to make it something unique and different, and they just did not like the stick in the mud feeling that the leadership gave them.
Mhm.
They didn't trust that leadership. They didn't have a lot of respect for them because the leadership were not. They were kind of the generation after the nine old men, so they were almost like the B team. A lot of people refer to them as, and felt like they only got their leadership roles by the fact that they were just still there, and there was
Yeah.
really nobody else to get it. Um, So it was just a perfect storm of generational conflict. Young people that want to just upend everything, and um, the older guard that just wants to say, no, 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 we're gonna keep things the way they've always been. We're gonna hold tight to that, the standards that have always been there, and you know, and the sparks flew
Yeah.
for sure.
And I think if that was rock bottom, and then I think you start climbing out of it. So as you look at this, all the research, all the pieces you put together, what were the lessons that Disney learned moving forward that they applied and were able to get them out of it?
Mm. Um, let's think for a second. That's a good
Yeah.
question. Um, I think you start seeing some change happening in the early 80s, particularly in live action, when you get a younger man named Tom Wilhite who came in and to run the whole studio, both animation and live action. and and one of Tom's biggest um, decree, I don't know, decree is the right word, but sort of what he realized is um, we got to let go of Walt.
Mm,
He was
mm,
really the first person to say we got to let that go, not just in a disrespectful way, not saying we have to forget he ever existed, but Tom started doing things like uh, there was a huge art exhibit in New York of Disney animation art. And there had been others in the past, but in the past, Walt Disney always got the credit for the artwork. It was just Walt Disney's animation
yeah.
studio, basically. but they very particularly gave credit to every artist by name for each of the pieces. So they started trying to say these are the people that worked on these movies under
Mm,
Walt. Yes, Walt was there. They started bringing, and Frank and Ollie had their book come out, Disney Animation: The Illusion of Life. Those their press, they went on a big press tour, and they started, people started realizing, oh, there's these two guys named Frank. That's really where the Nine Old Men, just
mhm.
even that concept, I think, started becoming part of the vernacular. I don't think anybody really knew what that was until Frank and Ellie wrote their book and then started going out on interviews and talking about that. And then suddenly people were like, oh, these are all the people that worked on these movies, and realizing it's a it's a group effort. It's a group of creative people. Yes, Walt was the leader. But these are the, you have to start investing in the people. Um, they're the ones that are going to be moving things forward. So Tom was really instrumental in kind of gently cutting that tether to Walt, and I think then you start seeing some change. But I think overall it's just you have to be. I think what everybody learned is you have to embrace that Walt concept of keep moving forward. You just
Yeah,
and Walt's everyone loved Walt Disney and the films that they all made. No one had any interest in tarnishing those films. They just wanted to start stretching and pushing the boundaries of what Disney could be. Um, and you really see that in live action. Also, once Eisner and Katzenberg come in, taking the Touchstone label and like really expanding Disney live action into, you know, not just PG 13. Well, yeah, PG-13 existed,
yeah.
but even R-rated movies started pushing those boundaries with that different label. So I think it's just embracing the notion of keep moving
Move
forward, really,
forward.
and not saying that just because of Meet the Robinsons,
I was about to
but I mean, really,
say.
you have to, you just have to keep pushing,
Yeah.
you know.
Um, right, that's a good transition point. So you the in between area happens. You hit the Renaissance. Everything is golden. Everything's wonderful. And then and I think we'll talk more about the music piece. But all these films of the Renaissance are very the Ashman and the Menken, and then there's a period where your movies come out, right? I think Emperor's New Groove turns 25 this year, which is crazy because I remember
Yeah.
seeing it in the theaters. And Meet the Robinsons is 18. Would you say the movies you brought to life were a much more successful transition, but a transition to like the Frozen era type thing when the music started happening again? There's a very specific set of movies. So talk about that era when you made your movies.
Yeah. So I got there in 95. So the first movie that, so Pocahontas had just released and Hunchback was in production.
Mhm.
So Pocahontas still a big musical, Hunchback a really big musical.
Underrated musical.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there were still musicals in the pipeline, but it was certainly clear that um, audiences started, I don't want to say backlash, but maybe there was a boredom with
Mm,
the kind of the Disney musical because Lion King was a monster hit. That was the peak.
for sure.
Pocahontas did well, but not as well. And then each movie progressively, with some exceptions, did less and less business. And I think the feeling was the Disney formula, if you will, the fairy tale, fantasy musical, might be getting stale. So let's try some different things. So still keeping, music involved. Certainly what, you know, Tarzan was I would say it's a musical, but
Yeah.
none of the characters sing except for a
Ex-
couple. There's a few exceptions in there, but it's not a book musical where the characters are really singing their story points and all that. And that was very much pulled from Toy Story as well, because Toy Story really did a bold move, which is we're going to have songs, but they're going to be sung over the action by this almost musical narrator.
Mhm.
And so that's what, for the most part on Tarzan, Phil Collins kind of became that musical narrator. Embers in a Groove had a few songs, but not so much.
Sting wrote him.
Sting, yep.
Yeah.
Um, Atlantis was very intentionally, but from the filmmakers, not a musical, no songs. That was a
Mhm.
very, very conscious choice of theirs. From the directors of Beauty and the Beast, one of the great Disney musicals, they said we don't want to do a musical.
Mm.
So now there were things kind of shaking things up. Lilo and Stitch had music, but it was Elvis.
Yeah,
It
right.
was needle drop music. It wasn't original music written for it, save for a few examples. Um, and then Meet the Robinsons. Being such a Disney music fan, um, I find that Disney animation, and this is just my own kind of mantra,
Yeah.
has to be music in a Disney movie in some capacity. And in my opinion, it has to be original. It has to be written for the movie. It doesn't have to be characters singing. And Meet the Robinsons never felt like it would work to have characters singing. It never quite felt like that is the type of movie this is. But I really wanted music to be a part of it. So very early, we started, we grabbed a bunch of songs and put them in as placeholders to kind of say, all right, I'd like a song here that's like this. I'd
Hmm.
like a song here that's like this. And we did that all throughout. And then as we hired all the artists to come in and fill plug those holes with original songs, um, it was very helpful to have that roadmap that we could kind of say, okay, we've isolated where we want the songs and what type of songs, and now, let's make something specific for the movie. So very important to me to have music as part of it.
It's funny because we watched Meet the Robinsons again last night because I like the movie and so is my
Oh,
family and I was excited to chat with you, so I wanted to brush up on it. We've seen it a
thanks.
bunch of times, but I listened to it with a different ear. First of all, Danny Elfman wrote the score. Let's
Oh
not,
my
yeah,
God.
I
Yeah.
mean, for so clearly that's a conscious decision. But then you have a big hit with Matchbox 20. You have Rufus Wainwright. You have All American Rejects. It Might Be Giant, the Jonas Brothers. I do think that amongst those, you could tell that music was important. And, you know, I still say at the end of the movie, like you can't watch that ending and listen to the Matchbox 20 song without, as you want, as any Disney musical happens, you get choked up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So lucky, fortunate to get that song from Rob Thomas because I mean we couldn't have it's funny because I had temped in the song I Can See Clearly Now
Ah,
for that sequence for the end where Little Wonders is right now. The kind of the upbeat, I forget the artist now, but um very positive and a little more, it's a bit more up tempo, a little more of a positive, like, hey, everything's like you kind of ambling down the road saying, I can see clearly now the rain is gone. And that seemed to work really well in all of our workshop screenings. But then when we met with Rob Thomas, he gave us the demo, and it was just a piano demo. It was just Rob and a piano, so it was very somber,
mm,
very low. I don't want to say low energy, but like, you know, it was the mood was very deep. You
yeah.
know, so we cut in the demo, and then the next time we screened it, I remember people were like, "Whoa!" Everybody was kind of thrown. And it was actually Glenn Keane, the animator, the amazing animator, big hero of mine. But he was at the screening and he came up and he had seen the I Can See Clearly Now a million times, that version.
Sure.
It was like, Steve, I don't know. I don't know if that works. It's just so, it's just so down. It's just so, yeah. I was like, it'll be okay. It'll be okay, Glenn. It'll be okay. But it was funny how, you get used to these things when we see them so many times, and then you make one little change and everybody gets thrown. But and so obviously in the arrangement of the final version, we were able to kind of boost it. But just the fact that the first line of the song was "Let It Go,"
Yeah.
which A is another way of saying keep moving forward, and we have the anti don't let it go. We have don't let it go earlier in the movie through the bowler hat guy
Yeah, of course.
talking to himself. So it was like, man, this couldn't have been a more perfect marriage.
It, and it really does work. It's almost it. of all the movies I think in the era, I think it's pretty much a non-musical musical. And I say it because, like you said, they're not singing the songs, but music is a very important character throughout it. And with Elfman writing the script, it's not a very Elfman-esque score.
Right.
It's great. It works perfectly, but it's not the Tim Burton-y Danny Elfman. It is a
No.
a very different, upbeat one. You don't hear that much of him that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, I haven't gotten starstruck too many times, but working with Danny was definitely one of them
Yeah.
because I have been a huge Danny fan
Amazing.
forever.
Amazing.
And just to be like, oh my gosh, I'm talking to this. We went to his house and he played us his synth demos like once a week. We would go for, I don't know, a month or so. Was just like, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is incredible. But one of the things the first time we met, he came to the studio and we didn't show him the whole movie, but we showed him just, bits and pieces and walked him around the studio and showed him artwork and kind of talked him through the movie. And he said, well, my first question is, why me? Why do you want me for this movie? And to me, I said, well, the movie is very heartfelt, very emotional, uh, but it's also really silly and really funny. There's also there's moments of menace and threat. And I said, you do all of those things
Mm,
extremely well. For the heart, I think I mentioned Big Fish.
yeah.
For the comedy, I don't remember what my example was, but I gave a few scores to kind of hit each one of those. Um, and it worked, I guess, because he said yes.
Amazing.
But
Amazing.
but yeah, none of them. And Big Fish obviously is a Tim Burton movie, but it's not it's definitely Tim Burton exercising different muscles
Totally.
than the Batman, Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands kind of thing, which I love. But certainly that was not what this movie was. And there's a few little Elfmanisms here and there when he would play us the demos or we were recording the score. I was like, oh yeah, there's a little button thing in there or something. But for the most part, he's well, like all composers, they're in a weird way, they're like actors, and
Sure.
you cast them for the role, and then have to they have to disappear into that role and do what's best for that part. So he very smartly knew what to do, and we just let him do it.
So you kind of mentioned it before, like you have to have music in your movies, right? Talk about the role that you find that music plays, even in non-musical songs. Like,
Yeah.
how do you use it? How do you make people feel with it? What's your kind of hypothesis and your theory about how to use it?
Well, I think it's very much a gut feeling. It's interesting because I'm trying to think of the best way to articulate it. I'm not sure I know how to, and that's
Hmm,
probably because it's more of a gut thing.
sure.
And again, what's great about our process at Disney, because we iterate so often with our movies and we're watching them in storyboard form so many times. The great thing is you can go, what if we just what if we made this a song
Hmm,
what if we just took all the dialogue out and let's I don't know, let's put this Beatles song in there and see what happens. And suddenly, you get a different mood, you get a different tone. There's also, you can play counterpoint to what's going on, or you can underline what's going on with the song. Um, it's a great, it's a great shortcut for information. Obviously, lots of times a song is a montage.
hmm
And you can like Tarzan's another great example. A good friend of mine, Mark Kennedy, story artist, he boarded the Son of Man song on
hmm
Tarzan. And that covers what Tarzan from like 10 to, I don't know, 20 or something, like a good 10, 15 years or something of Tarzan's life in a what, 2, 3 minute song.
Yeah.
Um, so much information you can get out in it with a song. So that's great too. They're great shortcuts for that. If you have a lot of exposition you need to get out, sometimes you can telescope it all down into a song and make it into a montage. Um, I think it's like feeling the emotions of the story. And maybe I'm just making this up as I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
no, please. That's great.
Like maybe it's, can this moment, okay, will the emotion of this moment play better as score, where the audience is putting their emotion into it,
Yeah.
or is it better as a song, to so that the movie is telling the audience what's going on in the characters' heads? Does that make
Mhm,
sense?
mhm, mhm. It totally makes
Um,
sense.
like, some of the Meet the Robinson songs, Another Believer, for example, in the beginning, it's like a monologue in a weird way
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
It's like an inner monologue, or in theater, a character stepping to the front of the stage and giving a monologue. A lot of times songs and musicals, um, or even just musical films, are monologues. So you can play it like that. And sometimes you want specificity of what the character is thinking or feeling, so you put it into lyrics. But sometimes you just want the general, I think you just want the general emotion of this moment, so the score can carry that.
Yep.
Um, so maybe that's part of it as well.
I think that you kind of summed it up perfectly earlier, which is when you're talking Danny Elfman, is like there's menace, there's heartfelt, there's love, and the music kind of helps carry that and helps bring the audience in. It's just such I've always found to be such an important emotional attachment to the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And that's why I like listening to film scores in general, is
Oh,
because
sure.
even if I don't know the movie, it's funny because they're just like instant emotion to me, because that's the whole, I mean, music in general is, I think, emotion,
Yeah,
but a film score is expressly written to elicit an emotional response. So I love listening to film scores. They have to be the right, I have to match the right score with the right mood, of
totally.
course. But it's just like instant feeling. Um, so yeah.
And just another interesting transition piece. So you also directed Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
I know music is important to you, and we talked about, the Frozen era. You just happened to have a couple of people write music for Winnie the Pooh, Bobby Lopez and Chris Lopez, who, oh, by the way, happened to write the music for Frozen. So
Yeah.
how did you discover them, and did you know that they were going to be doing that kind of transition to the next phase of Disney history?
Right. Well, so Disney Animation has a music department, and so at the time, our the animation music producer, was his name's Tom McDougall, and then the bigger Disney companies music producer, his name was Chris Montan, and Chris worked with all the music with Pixar, with I think Parks, with the theatrical, Broadway stuff, and also Disney Animation. And then Tom was kind of his right hand man. So they were always giving us ideas for composers, for songwriters, score composers, and also
Mhm.
songwriters for depending on what movie it was. And Tom McDougall would always make these mix CDs of just different artists, just to kind of inspire you, and sometimes introduce you to people you might not even know, but might be really great. Or they also know the people that have come to Disney and expressed interest in writing for Disney someday. So
Sure.
there's also those people. Um, and so they gave us a list of composers for Winnie the Pooh. Bobby and Kristen were on there. We knew of Bobby Lopez from Avenue Q.
It's so
Um,
damn funny.
Book of Mormon has
Oh my
not
God.
come out yet,
Yeah.
so he was working on that. So that still had not hit, but certainly Avenue Q, was a great calling card for Bobby. Um, and so actually, myself and my directing partner Don Hall, we picked, I think, three songwriting duos from the list that they had given us, and we actually had this weird little song bake off.
Mm.
And so we gave them a moment in the movie, and each of those songwriting teams wrote a demo for that song. They were all fantastic, but Bobby and Kristen's were like, yeah, that's perfect. And it ends up being the Honey Dream song, Everything is Honey, that's in the movie right now.
Sure.
That was the song they wrote. And so it was it was definitely a no-brainer. And because they had musical theater experience, um, and Bobby and of course we found out later that Kristen did as well, has such a great sense of humor too, and could kind of they could take Pooh seriously, but also we can kind of not take it too seriously with
Yeah,
somebody like Bobby and Kristen.
yeah.
Um, so they came on, they wrote our songs. We had such a great time working with them, and we figured they would go on to do great things. But the Frozen project was in development, but who knew it was going to turn out to be what it ended up turning out to be? Never would have guessed, but
It just goes to show because, like you said, people were sick of the musical, and then you
yeah,
have all these great stories, like you said, non-musical musicals, music in the background, except for maybe Atlantis, and then all of a sudden you find some good music, and then the Broadway musical happens all over again. It's like
really,
history repeating itself.
yep.
Yeah,
And I'm curious. I think that's not to take anything away from the work in the movie Frozen, but I think what it also had going for it was the fact that there had been quite a few years of non-Disney musical
yeah,
movies. Did a Princess and the Frog in there,
yeah.
Tangled,
Tangled,
or that.
Moana, yeah, yeah.
So there was a few, but it was not as consistent as it had been. So I think that the audience was primed and ready for it.
Yeah. And I'm just curious if it's going to be another one of those, what's going to be the Lion King high point before the
Yeah.
next generation? Because there's going to be another transition. I mean, if history shows us that you've shown,
Yep.
right, there are always going to be transitions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to not to be negative, but certainly Disney animation, I think right now is in a bit of an in-between time.
Yeah, for
The past
sure.
couple of movies haven't, well, Moana 2 did obviously really great, but a couple movies prior to that were it was they were a little bit in a downturn with the audience. So maybe hopefully Moana 2 is kind of showing us that we're coming out of it, and Zootopia 2 this year is going to be great,
Super
and
excited.
everything will be hunky dory again. But I think the studio had been in another in between time for a while. And when I started at the beginning of an in between time
Yeah.
because uh, you know, even all the way up through making most of Meet the Robinsons. I mean, prior to that was Chicken Little, which didn't do great.
That was a good movie. Yeah, I know
It was
not,
pretty
but
good.
they've
Yeah.
actually gotten life afterwards because those are good
Yes.
movies. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
But from an audience
yeah.
standpoint, I mean, even Emperor's New Groove didn't do well. Atlantis didn't do well. Treasure Planet. Lilo did pretty well. What's the other one I'm thinking? Oh, there was Dinosaur. There was Home on the Range did not
Yeah,
do well.
yeah.
So that was an in-between time as well.
Yeah, interesting. I guess might as well ask 25 years of the Emperor's New Groove. I remember I remember going to the theater and I laugh a lot at movies. It kind of makes my wife crazy, but I just remember there was like I think the Patrick Warburton, the whole Kronk thing is just a touch of genius.
Yeah.
And David Spade was great and John Goodman was great. But I think that Eartha Kitt and Patrick Warburton, they make that movie. And another thing, you have everyone saying pull the lever Kronk. They're memes now.
Oh,
It's really, really was stood the test of time.
yeah. I don't I bet if you asked anybody who worked on the movie when it came out, they would have said, well, nobody's ever going to remember this thing because the company really buried it. It didn't do well. I think the reviews were pretty good,
Yeah.
but it just and again, that's not an indictment of the movie. It's just what happens. Sometimes movies just don't connect. And so certainly I thought, well, that's just going to disappear and no one's ever going to remember that. So the fact that, yeah, it's now all those quotes part of pop culture lexicon now. Uh, I, I shocked, never would have guessed in my wildest dreams that it would have lasted this long.
I'm not surprised because I remember watching it. I'm like, this is sophisticated humor. And like the best kind of, family movies are the ones that the kids can laugh and the adults can
Yeah,
laugh. And I
yeah,
think that is like very Bugs Bunny, right? I think that's a
yeah,
very good example of high level humor that can really make people laugh.
yeah, yeah. I agree.
Again, speaking of transitions, let's talk more about you, right? You left Disney a couple of years ago. You've worked on Garfield. What are you working
Mhm.
on now?
I'm back at Disney
Oh,
Animation.
you
I came
are.
back in August
Oh,
last year.
I did not know that.
Uh,
Congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
that's great.
So, and I went back to storyboard on a Disney Plus series called Tiana. So it's a Princess
Uh,
and the Frog follow-up. Unfortunately, about a month ago or so, the announcement was made that that series is not going
Love
forward.
that. Yeah.
But we are still making a 30-minute Tiana piece for Disney Plus. And so now I'm one of the two directors on that. So
Amazing. That's
yeah,
great.
yeah. So that's what I'm doing right now. We've done a few passes of an outline that seems to be getting good traction, good reactions from people. And so hopefully a script will be coming in another couple weeks, months, maybe, and then we'll start boarding in the summer, maybe.
That's
I'm
crossed.
crossing my fingers.
Anika Noiro is going to be the voice of Diana.
That's still the
Right?
idea.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, I don't want to ask anything you're not allowed to say, but music wise, any,
Yeah, unsure at this point
yeah,
because the series there was I think two songs per episode, so very music centric. I mean,
sure,
as you can imagine,
of
Princess and the
course.
Frog, New Orleans. Music will definitely be a part of this, but we're not quite sure how it's going to work yet, and um, still pretty early. But there are a few moments we've kind of earmarked for. Okay, there could be a song here, there could be a song here, there could be a song here. But again, the story is still very broad strokes, so the story may transform, and then that might change the song placement. So we'll just, and it's only 30 minutes, so the songs will have to be
Right.
uh, very focused and very efficient.
That's wonderful. How can people find you? How can they follow you? How can they learn what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm my handle is Steve Hat Guy, like bowler hat guy, but Steve Hat Guy. And that's me on X, on Instagram, on Blue Sky. Um, yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's good. And also, I will also, again, just for you, plug the book.
Yes.
Really, I read it, and it's one of those things where it's just so if you're a Disney fan, it's fascinating. If you're a fan just like corporate history, it's fascinating. And kudos to you. This is a extraordinarily well-researched, thoughtful, analytical book. It's history, it's culture, it's everything. So I could not recommend it highly enough. I devoured it. It was absolutely terrific.
Thanks, Jonathan. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you can get it on Amazon,
Yep.
and anywhere else. And what I'll do is I'll put the links to the Amazon link to that as well as how to find you in the show notes.
Perfect.
That's
You can also
great.
go to oldmillpress.com and order one there as well.
That will be great. Steve, it's so great chatting with you. Maybe when Tiana comes out, we'd love to have you on again and talk
I
more
would love
about
that.
it. But it'll
Yeah.
be great. And in the meantime, have a good weekend. Thanks so much for your time.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan.
All right, thanks, you.